Hello again from India. Welcome to episode 112 of the Be Yourself and Love It podcast with me, Antony Sammeroff. Namaste to that one person on BitShoot who commented saying, "Say namaste again and bet I'll slap you." Well, I bet you won't. Here is my interview with Dawn Lester, co-author of the book What Really Makes You Ill, on PRN.
Good evening. We are Vaccine Information Coalition, and you're listening to Progressive Radio Network, the most listened to commercial-free and truth radio program in the world. My name is Antony Sammeroff. I'm filling in for the great Renee Oakes-Tunsky, and the title of our show is What in the Cell is Going On. We're on every Monday at 2 p.m. EST, which can be accessed live on prn.live or by calling 641-793-7091. Today I have an extraordinarily special guest on the show today. It's Dawn Lester. She is the co-author of an amazing book that's done brilliantly well called What Really Makes You Ill. Are you here with me now, Dawn?
Yes, I am. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. We've had a little bit of an email correspondence for the last couple of years, so it's very nice to be talking to you over the radio for the first time. So I want to. You'll be running a course soon, but first of all, let's talk a little bit about what really makes you ill. Not just the book, but what really does make a person ill. Because I guess I'm wondering how you came to an alternative understanding of what makes people ill, the etiology, which that means the origin of disease. When did you start to think that what most people think is the cause of illness isn't necessarily what causes most illness?
Wow, yes, it started many years ago. David Parker and I were writing a book actually about the nature of reality, which is a somewhat different topic. And in that we were looking at, the nature of illness. We also came across the work of Bruce Lipton and his extremely well-known famous book, The Biology of Belief. Which was extremely eye-opening because it showed that our ideas, beliefs, thoughts can affect our body, which was pretty amazing. And at the same time, we were thinking, well, hang on a minute, there are all these different diseases we're supposed to catch. There's all these germs out there that we're supposed to be vulnerable to. So how does that work? How does that fit into it? And so we started looking at, just trying to find out, how does that work? Because it seemed to be a contradiction that there were these germs out there that could, affect us. So starting looking at various diseases, the first one, or so-called infectious diseases, the first one being HIV/AIDS, or HIV being the alleged virus that is supposed to cause the disease called AIDS, and that was a huge rabbit hole to dive down because we spent quite a long time looking at that. We were connecting with a number of people in the so-called AIDS dissident movement at the time. This was in around trying to think now, sort of 2008 or something like that. So, this is a number of years ago, because that was the first disease or so-called infectious disease we were looking at, that we decided to really spend some time on it to actually understand. And at that time, I remember coming across the work of Dr. Stefan Lanka, who was a virologist, and some of his work where he was explaining not only that there's no evidence for this so-called virus called HIV to be the causative agent of the disease that is given the label AIDS, he was raising questions about other viruses, at which point it was, okay, we need to look even further at this. And so that took us down, many years of research into various infectious diseases, because we were looking at the kind of questions that raised for us were the kind of questions we knew we would have to answer for if we had this conversation with other people. So, it's always the well, if this, then what about that? What about this? What about these other so-called diseases? What how about these other epidemics, pandemics? The so-called Spanish flu, or 1918 flu, as it's sometimes called, and really not being satisfied. Pardon?
Oh, I seem to have lost you for a moment, but you're back now.
Oh, right. Sorry about that. So we were looking at other, so-called viruses and these other diseases to find out, well, if it isn't this thing called a virus, then, why are people ill? What happens? What causes these outbreaks, these symptoms? And then we came across the work of the natural hygiene movement. And they were saying quite clearly that the state of the body, the environment, internal and external environment, are far more important factors for our health. So that is what is sort of now often called terrain. So again, it's the internal and external terrain that affects. Yes. So that's what affects our health. And at the same time, we also learned that there are no actual diseases as such, which, I know is quite difficult sometimes for people to get their head around. They're just lots of different sets of symptoms, lots of different symptom complexes, and different combinations are just given different labels. And it might sound simplistic. It is actually more simple, because that reflects how the body actually works, which is what what people explain as terrain. What we're exposed to affects our health, and the body is not some just simple machine thing that just functions and got all these different parts that can be affected by certain things, and if you just fix one part, everything will be all right. It's a holistic system, and anything that affects one part will affect everything else. And at the same time, it's not some it's not stupid, it doesn't make mistakes. The symptoms that we experience are actually the body's own working mechanisms to restore health, to keep itself functioning properly. And it's, as we're sort of expelling certain things, that's just part of the body having a clear out. That's quite simple. If you think like your nose is running when you've got what's called a cold, it's just your body kind of clearing out some stuff through your nose. It doesn't mean that you've caught something that has made you ill. It's the opposite. There's so much has been inverted, and that's a key inversion, that it's not something bad. It's not something that's attacked you. It's your body actually looking after itself, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, in a sense, it makes you think. People get trapped in thinking that their body's against them because they're getting sick, when a lot of the time what they take to be symptoms of disease are symptoms of cure, if you like. So as you mentioned, if you got a runny nose or you have mucus, that's the body's attempt to trap particles that ought not to be inside the body and get them out through the detoxification channels, the outlets from the body. So yes, it could be, one way we could think is the body just breaks down and goes wrong somehow. And another thing is, maybe if you get your, plaque in your arteries or something like that, that's an intelligent mechanism from the body trying to put a bandage around the arteries so that they don't burst. Your body's actually trying to save you. So a lot of people came to the understanding that most of what we've been told about disease is wrong, even in the from the COVID pandemic, if we can call it that. You seem to have been way ahead of the curve. When did your book come out?
The What Really Makes You Ill book came out actually in December 2019, just before.
I mean, like, it's almost as though it were meant to be.
Yes, yes, it does seem to be like that, doesn't it? So yes, it was yes, divine timing, and it was yes. I mean that was the culmination of 10 years of work. We did at the time, very early in 2010, publish a very small version of the understanding we had at the time. We just wanted to share the information and help people know that, it's germs aren't making you ill. So we did put that book out, and then it took another 10 years to get the other book out. And just to explain that why it took 10 years, the book's nearly 800 pages. And
right.
It covers more than just the fact that germs don't make you ill. It's more than that. It covers the kind of factors that people might want to consider when they think about their own health. One of the problems, of course, is that many people want the alternative. Well, if it's not a virus, what is it? They want a straight swap of one causal factor. So they say, oh, well, it's that. And it's quite difficult when they hear, well, it's not a single other thing. It's usually a combination of factors, and it'll be different combinations for different people, which is why different people respond. Some people have what are called colds for a few days, and other people have them for weeks. So there's the intensity of the symptoms, and you just even whether they get symptoms around other people. There's so much within all of it, and we're still looking at all the different factors that could be involved. I mean, we're learning more about how the body works and finding out that there are lots of unknowns still. So we can only look at the information we have that adversely affects the body, that causes the body to then initiate these mechanisms to then that look like illness because you don't feel well when your body's trying to clear this stuff out. And part of the reason is because the body actually is intelligent, and if it's making you feel tired and not hungry, that's encouraging you to rest and not eat, because when you're resting and not eating, then the body can use its energy to actually do the healing, to go through the cleansing and healing itself. Whereas if you are still eating, I mean, I know there's a sort of a myth of, you've got to feed yourself up, give yourself the energy, whereas in fact it's the opposite, because this is where the evidence lies, that the body is needing it's better for the body to have the energy to actually heal itself rather than digest food, because it does require quite a lot to actually digest the food.
That's right. I was told that 50% of our energy goes to digestion. And when people say you need your energy, you need to eat to get up your energy, your poor mum saw you when you were ill, and you didn't want to eat anything because that's the intelligence of nature, which you were still in touch with. And you thought, no, I don't want anything to eat. And your mum came in and said, well, you need to keep your strength up, so have this chicken soup or whatever it was. She was mistaken, because all animals fast when they're sick, drinking only water, and it was the intelligence of the body telling you to take a rest. So when we fast, or we limit the number of calories we eat, that saves that energy over for healing. And of course, we're not actually getting the energy. We're not living on the energy of the food we eat today. We're living on the energy of the food we ate yesterday or a couple of days ago. It's a mistake on that level as well. And I think what people find a lot of the time is actually they start detoxing when they've not eaten, and they feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then they load up on, as my great teacher Yari Tunsky said, they used to load up on a donut and a cup of coffee or something like that, their body stops detoxing because it moves its emphasis to the stomach, and you go, wow, I must have been really hungry. I feel so much better now that I've had something to eat. But actually the reason why you feel better is because you've interrupted the process of your body cleaning itself. As far as the underlying condition of your body at the cellular level is concerned, you've just got worse rather than better.
Yes, that's the thing, that sometimes, because people feel better when they do something, they equate that to having healed, whereas it might not always be the case. It's just something has shifted, and like you say, the body's then shifted its attention, so it's no longer healing, so it stopped the mechanisms that are producing the symptoms, which, as you said, most people think are bad. I mean, they're not. I mean, they don't feel very pleasant. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing that you're going through. It's how we feel. So yes, it is really quite a lot to kind of unlearn and then relearn something different about how the body actually works.
Okay, so you had to study for over 10 years to put this book together because you were anticipating every or maybe you received every objection under the sun one by one, and you're like, oh, we better answer this question, we better answer that question, So what are some of the most common questions that people have when they're confronted with this new understanding of disease, that it's the terrain that matters, the underlying condition of the body at the cellular level, as my teacher Gary Tunsky said, rather than the microbes, that you might invite in microbes by eating the wrong food, but they are not the cause of disease, they're there because of it, so to speak. What are the main objections that you start to encounter, and how do you address them?
I think one of them is, as I said, well, if it's not a virus or bacterium, if it's not that, then what is it? And the desire for a very specific answer, a very direct, oh, well, it's that, a very decisive, very definitive answer. And it's not satisfactory for some people when, we start asking questions back, because you can't know exactly. I mean, nobody can ever know exactly what the cause was, because there are so many factors involved, and so you start asking questions, and they can't quite see the relevance of those questions. They just, well, yeah, but what was it? What the simple answer is, we don't know. I can't actually give you an answer. What I can do is make a few suggestions, and by asking a few questions, I can get an idea of your environment and the kinds of factors that may have been involved, that may have been contributing to your body deciding that it needed to undergo this cleansing mechanism. And the other thing is obviously, the phenomenon of more than one, two or more people in the same space exhibiting the same symptoms at the same time, and the contagion thing. How come that's not transmission? Because I started symptoms, and then the next day, the rest of my family had all these symptoms, so I must have spread it to them. That's the most common one.
Yeah, and that is a difficult one to tackle. Gary Tunsky used to say, if two people come into the elevator, someone sneezes, a third person comes in and sneezes, one of them gets mononucleosis, the other one doesn't. He said, what's the difference? It's the terrain. So obviously he believed that contagion was possible. It was what you ate or the condition of your body in the cellular level as to whether you invite it in when it comes to what you eat or what you rub on them. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out, so I missed some of that. I apologise. So There are always a lot of factors that are involved, and some of them are just having a common environment. So that's why people in the same family are likely to exhibit similar symptoms at a similar time, because they inhabit a similar environment. They're eating the same kinds of food, probably, not necessarily. And again, there are seasonal factors that come into it. There are environmental factors. So again, with that, there could be differences with children. For example, if they're in a school that has been doing an awful lot of cleaning with what you might call, the sort of toxic cleaning ingredients, then they're exposed to those chemicals. So they would have inhaled them, usually the sort of off-gassing or whatever. And so they're inhaling them, and that would irritate their systems, and they're more likely to then exhibit these symptoms. The other thing is that the other factor that is quite often not talked about is just simply which I think is sort of much more in your line of thing, is people's belief systems, and their certainly their belief in the idea of transmission and contagion. So, because we're all brought up, indoctrinated into the belief that, well, if somebody's got a cold, they'll pass it on to everyone else in the house, in the school, in the office, in the everything else. So there is that factor is important. And some people say, oh yes, and others say, oh no, it can't have been. And I accept that. I just suggest that it could be a possible factor. I can never say what it is. I can just offer the kind of ideas of what could be involved. I mean, there are so many questions to ask, like, have you just had sort of new carpet put in? Is there some kind of chemical off-gassing? Has something happened in the environment, external environment? Do you live near agricultural areas, and are the farmers spraying their fields with something? There are so many questions to ask. There are so many factors, and sometimes, in many of those cases, people aren't going to know the answers to those questions. And so they said, well, it can't be that. Well, I don't know. I'm just posing questions. And so people think take it as unsatisfactory. And I'm just saying, no, we don't know. These are the kinds of things that could irritate the body to get to the point where it then says, oh, time for a clean out.
Right. And I think to say you don't know altogether is, well, I mean, we can say in broad terms there's a few major causes of disease. My teacher Gary Tunsky would say the two main causes of disease are nutritional deficiencies and toxicity, accumulating toxicity to the cell. So, and these go together, because if your cell's full of metabolic waste, or it's full of toxic compounds, then it's hard for it to admit nutrients. By the same token, you need nutrients to run the process of detoxification. So nutritional deficiencies and cellular toxicity always go along together. We've got various sources, and we've admitted so many toxic chemicals into our air, our water, the food supply. They're spraying our produce with glyphosate, and various chemicals that are known to cause damage. The assault on now. In addition to that, we've got EMFs. Gary Tunsky also said there's a electromagnetic flow to the cell. There's an energetic flow to the cell, and I would add to those three, which had been previously identified. There's muscular problems that people don't even know that they have, because we have these muscle bands that go. The muscle band goes right from your big toe all the way up to your neck. So things that are going on in your ankle can affect your lower back. And I don't know if we quite call these disease. Well, I guess if you get excessively tight, that will affect the flow of your blood and things like that. So we don't necessarily know where the toxicity came from, but if you've got purging symptoms, it's a good bet that you have admitted toxicity. The other thing, nutritional deficiencies. Well, I mean, in 1993, the New England Journal of Medicine released a very well-researched report called Actual Causes of Death in the United States, and it stated that 70% of our diseases are lifestyle related, with poor diet and lack of exercise being the main risk factors, followed by things like smoking, drinking, taking drugs. And then again, 10 years later, they repeated the study and found much the same. Now, that means that even in mainstream medicine, they're terrain theorists 70% of the way. 70% of the way mainstream medicine are terrain theorists. Unfortunately, they don't take their own advice. They've not educated, they've not organized the medical system as though 70% of diseases are lifestyle related. If they had, 70% of what you went when you got to the doctor would be medical advice. And in my books and articles, I've covered instances of hospitals running programs that reduced the rates of diabetes and reduced the rates of heart disease, but then were stopped a few years later because they lost the private hospital's money. So although we're out here being called conspiracy theorists, abused for trying to spread the truth, meanwhile, if the mainstream doctors took their own advice, they'd see the information that appears in their journals, we'd be already 70% in agreement saying a lot of this is lifestyle. If you ask me, it's probably more like 95 or 99% is lifestyle related, and 1 to 5% is other.
Yes, you're saying about your books. I mean, going back to the what really makes you ill. I mean, it's, as I said, it's not just about infectious diseases and germs. We do cover all the different factors, sort of environmental toxins, and it's not to scare people, but it's just to give people, the information about how widespread it is. So, there's one chapter. It's almost a book length on its own, just about the environmental toxins. We also cover chronic diseases, what are called, non-communicable diseases. So we do look at those sorts of things and show that these are just different labels, and cover quite a few what are called autoimmune diseases, which is again, telling us that our body's just so stupid that it fights itself, which is the complete opposite, because the body's always looking to restore itself to health. That's what it does all the time. We also look at the training of doctors and why the system is the way it is, even though, as you say, there's some information that shows that they sort of know what's going on. And even the WHO fact sheets talk about things like, diet and exercise and smoking and drinking, things like that. Only their solutions are always pharmaceutical based. So it doesn't match. Right. You're quite right. It just doesn't match at all. Most of it is, it's lifestyle. I think also the fear and stress factor as well, because people are not functioning well if they're in a state of fear. The whole system is kind of locked up, I suppose, stressed out, like you were saying, and it affects how people are and how people think, or the fact that we're not able to think. So that there's it does cover quite a lot of ground, as I say, not just the germs, but also showing that one of the problems is the fact that the germ theory is pervasive, not just through the medical system. It goes into all sorts of areas of trying to kill the nasties, and so they've got all sorts of chemicals out there to kill the nasties in ordinary products, which are not based on, they're not part of the medical system. So you sort of like all sorts of personal care products are antibacterial.
Mm-hmm.
So it's shifted into those kinds of areas, and even some articles of clothing, they've got some kind of antibacterial something in them.
Right.
So again, it's spreading wider into other areas of our lives to keep everyone scared of these so-called germs. So it is quite important, and that could be. Could be. I think that pretty much is another factor in keeping people in fear, but also adding to that could be part of the lifestyle. Like you say, if people are using certain products because they are antibacterial, because they think that's helping to keep things clean,
right?
And then that's a lifestyle choice to choose those kinds of products. And of course, I'd agree with you that it's much higher than 70%. And one of the things I found really in the research was were these contradictions, like you've just pointed out, these organizations saying, it's 70% lifestyle. Like I say, the WHO fact sheets for a number of non-communicable diseases are, these, they're trying to, it's not just lifestyle, because they're trying to blame it on the person. So the person thinks it's their own fault, as opposed to recognizing that there are some environmental factors that aren't their fault, but it is blame the patient, it's your own fault, without the factor of the pharmaceutical products themselves being part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution.
Right. Yes, because most people now in the US are on 5 or 6 drugs by the time they're in their 60s. They have the most drugged population of all of history. If this approach was working, America would be the healthiest country in the world. If this approach was working, by the time, if you were on 5 or 6 medications when you were 60, by the time you were 70, you should be down to only 1 or 2. Gary Tunsky used to say, what they do is they treat what they practice is called David Copperfield medicine, like the stage magician David Copperfield. It's an illusion. It's the illusion that you're getting better when actually you're getting worse. The symptom goes away, and you're playing the magic shell game with symptoms, because and soon you're on the medical merry-go-round. The endocrinologist, the from one specialist to another specialist trying to find out what's wrong with you. In the meantime, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The funny thing is, despite their pomp and their looking down at anyone who they consider to be alternative, mainstream medicine hasn't actually been able to cure a single one of the major degenerative, metabolic, or so-called autoimmune diseases that are likely to affect us during our lifetime on this planet. In fact, almost all of them have become more common. So it takes a certain kind of cheek to act like you're the font of all knowledge and you know everything about everything and everyone else is anti-science, when the lack of results, when the results of your practice speak for themselves. So if non-communicable diseases, what we call degenerative, metabolic, or what are called autoimmune, as I say, what are called autoimmune because the body doesn't attack itself. You might not understand what the symptom is trying to do, but what the body is trying to do is prevent something worse. The body will allow something worse something bad to happen to prevent something worse. Okay, if you start to get fungus in your toes, okay, that's not no one likes that, but it's better than having fungus in your organs. So what the body will do is try and push out all the metabolic wastes into your toes, far away from the organs, so that those aren't affected to the best of its ability. That's like a fail-safe mechanism. We're told in naturopathy, if you get a tumor, that may very well be an intelligent mechanism from the body, creating a landfill site where it can throw all its toxins and put a sack around it to isolate it from harming the rest of the body. The first thing the doctor will do is take a pin and stick a pin through it, like in a biopsy. And we were told in naturopathy that's like a bit like someone setting off a bomb in a landfill site. You wouldn't want to do that. The whole reason why we've got a landfill site is to keep all that toxic waste away from habited areas. You wouldn't want to pop it open. So if it's not germs, so what is your understanding at this point of the etiology, that's the origins of of degenerative, metabolic, and what are called autoimmune diseases at this point?
That's a big question. I mean, one of the things in the
just some of the factors.
Oh yes. No, I was going to say is that one of the contradictions, or one of the comments I kept seeing in the research looking at these different chronic or non-communicable diseases, was that within the papers or in the WHO or CDC, whatever, there were the admissions that we don't know exactly what causes this, or we're not quite sure about this. There was constant conditional language, so there's nothing definite that they know about these conditions, except that they'll just give you some kind of medication for managing the symptoms, and that's all they ever do. From what I've looked at and what I've learned and am still learning, I think it's the more chronic conditions are a build-up of the body not being able to deal with the more, the acute conditions, or the acute conditions being suppressed by various products, pharmaceuticals or whatever, so the body is not actually clearing these problems. And so the toxicity builds up and it becomes more deeply embedded within the body. And so the body's no longer able to expel the toxins through the skin in, the normal kind of processes, or, through the nasal passages, or, sort of the normal routes of excretion. And so, there's a build-up, and as you've said, with tumours, I mean, the body will try and pack away these toxic build-up into places where it's not going to do so much harm, as you say, keeping it away from the major organs. And yet there comes a point, if, the person doesn't address the symptoms and doesn't keep on top, or addresses the symptoms in a way that actually keeps them suppressed, and then it's just a build-up. It's just a longer term, it's a long-term build-up of these problems and toxicities. At the same time, there are also ideas, and again going back to the belief system, that there are these conditions that are either genetic or hereditary. And so if there's something that various members of their family have experienced, they're brought up with the idea that it runs in the family. And so they've got that mindset that it runs in the family. And so they have that expectation. And it's so, it can be so easy to just say, oh, well, that's just woo-woo. I mean, it really isn't. That, the power of the mind to really manifest something within the body. There's just far too much evidence to be able to dismiss it just by saying, oh, well, doesn't make any sense. Well, it's true. I'm not saying it's the case all the time. From what I've looked at, the research, there are serious question marks over the idea that anything is genetic in origin. So, and again, that really goes back to Bruce Lipton's work, The Biology of Belief, and he said, that our genes don't control our biology, which is where the idea of epigenetics comes from. And I think that's been hijacked as well and given a slightly different meaning. But the whole point is that the genes don't cause anything, or the genes are affected by the environment. They don't. So again, this is back to the terrain idea. Our bodies aren't affected by our genes. Our genes don't control what happens in our body. And so again, the idea of something being genetic or hereditary, And just something is just because it's in the family or other people. I mean, there's a possibility of something being something occurring that's similar. It's not because it's hereditary, but there could be something within the parents or one of the parents that is, within their system, a weakness that then creates a similar condition in any children. So again, these are just ideas. These are still being looked at, and again, being electrical, as you said, our bodies are electrical as well. So being affected by non-native EMFs, by electrical systems around us, and that can also disrupt our body's normal electrical system. And of course, the two major organs that run on that are electrical, because they're tested, the brain and the heart. And of course, they're probably two of the major organs that have problems with them. So again, cardiovascular disease being probably considered to be the number one disease, I think, for I don't know if that's globally or just in certain areas, but it's certainly considered one of the major chronic illnesses, cardiovascular disease, which is
certainly,
it covers a range of different conditions. And again, because the heart functions electrically, the more we're affected by these non-native EMFs can actually affect how the heart functions. And so, there's so many different factors to this. Unfortunately, we're swimming in all kinds of toxins and things around us, and we need to find ways to strengthen our body so it can do its best job at looking after itself.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, heart disease is the major killer, partly because if nothing else gets to you first, then your heart will eventually give out. But it seems that a lot of our lifestyle does have a great effect on heart disease. And as you say, we're living this toxic soup. Gary Tunsky would say that it's all in the genes is the Calvin Klein theory of health and disease. And he used to say, if your doctor tells you that your disease is genetic, try this. Ask him to tell you exactly what gene is responsible for your condition. Now, that will really stump him, unless it's Huntington's disease, or a congenital genetic defect. They almost certainly won't be able to do it. An interesting thing is that the epigenetic research. Joel Wallach was like, he wrote a really good book called "Dead Doctors Don't Lie," and when he found that when he was working in zoos and things like that, a lot of the time he discovered that a lot of conditions in animals that were thought to be genetic could actually be prevented by mineral treatments. So this demonstrated that if you corrected a mineral deficiency, all of a sudden what were thought to be genetic defects go away. In one instance, he had these foxes that every time they bred, the offspring all had a cleft palate. So they thought in the zoo that it was a genetic defect. But once they remineralized, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, all of a sudden those foxes started to have healthy offspring. So we're thinking about that now in terms of the fact that we have an infertility crisis on our hands now, with one out of 6 people worldwide not being able to conceive. And we're thinking maybe this has got something to do with the fact that people aren't getting the level of nutrition that they used to, and they're eating so much junk food that it means that what nutrition they do have, the body's system's so damaged and overtaxed trying to deal with the excessive demands of processing junk food that their organs aren't as good at stripping the nutrients from the food they are getting either. I'd be interested in knowing what sort of stories, now you've been in this space for quite a long time now, you've heard from people who had diseases that they were told were incurable by the mainstream doctors and managed to take on terrain-based protocols and demonstrate that their disease actually were reversible?
Yes, I mean, not just in the last few years, I mean, through the research and the reading, and that was part of the feedback of realizing that, it works. And I think that's one of the most important factors. It's not about peer-reviewed journal articles, and I'm sure we can sort of go into the problems with that, but maybe not. But it's to actually say, well, what works? What actually helps a person not just feel a bit better, but their whole body to function better, so that they have a massive improvement in their well-being. So it's not just the symptoms going away, because we know that can just be masked by, something that is just suppressing the symptoms, but where they actually have a complete change in their whole health and well-being. And that's, I mean, the books are just replete with those kinds of examples. I mean, if you're familiar with the Gersons, I mean, they had so many people that went to them who were in a pretty bad condition. They tried other things, and yet they were able to help these people restore health. I don't want to use the word cure, because that's sort of suggest. I mean, it's a taboo word anyway. It also suggests that there was something to cure, as opposed to helping the body restore itself to health.
I always use the word reverse disease, because we see disease as a process. It gets started, and it can get worse and worse and worse as it goes on. But it's not, to suggest that the body's making a mistake because it's throwing up symptoms which are actually the body demonstrating its intelligence and ability to manage stress. To call that a disease is like to misunderstand. The universe is a lot more benevolent than we think it is. In these ways, everything is not out to get you, and everything and everything you think that the body's doing, which you think is something wrong with it, typically is something right with it. So if you watch the documentaries, The Beautiful Truth and The Gerson Miracle, in one of them, a woman I'm trying to remind myself of which one came out first. I think it was The Beautiful Truth. That can be watched online. It was in 2008, and The Gerson Miracle in 2004. There was a woman in both of these documentaries. In the first one, she comes in with terminal ovarian cancer and 6 months to live. She's emaciated. 4 years later, the difference will shock you. I mean, she basically has turned back the hands of time. She looks like a younger woman than she did in the first documentary, and yet, in the mainstream, they'll tell you that Gerson therapy is quackery and it doesn't work. In the meantime, as I found out, shockingly from my research, you can actually get a cancer treatment approved without even demonstrating to the regulator that it increases people's length of life or their quality of life. The only thing you need to do is demonstrate that it shrinks a tumour. Now, there's a big problem with that, because there's stacks and stacks of studies in the oncology literature that says that tumor shrinkage does not necessarily improve the outcomes of patients. Tumor shrinkage can be transient and it can regrow fast. The cancer can just bounce back more aggressively than ever after treatment, or the patient can bleed to death, or it can get, I was going to say it can get an infection because their immune disease has been wiped out, but we're now not sure that an infection is what we originally thought it was. Basically, they can die from the treatment, but the treatment will still get approved. The government will still shell out for it, and so will private insurers. So it's really shocking that they can turn around and say something like a genius like Gerson was a quack, when their own journals admit that their own treatments are not scientifically verified, but they certainly bring a lot of money into private hospitals in the US, and they certainly keep everyone's salary going in the NHS as well.
Yes. I mean, it is a fantastic business model, and in most of the papers that you look at that are looking at various so-called diseases, they are looking at just certain reactions or interactions between particular chemicals, and if it has what they perceive to be a beneficial response in whatever it is they're dealing with in their laboratory, and quite often at the end of those papers, there's all this conditional language, or it could do this and it might do that. And we need more research. So, they're asking for more funds so they can carry on doing their work, looking at these things, and the more you look at these papers, and it seems to be certainly moving in the direction that it's moving so far away from anything that's connected to the intact living human body. They're now dealing with, just molecules. It's not even dealing with actual cells from a human, and of course, dealing with all the animal experiments that they're conducting, and so many of those animals have very different systems from the human body. We aren't the same. I mean, there may be some similarities in some of the functions. The reason, and again, we cover vivisection in the book as well, because the reason for these animal experiments is because apparently it's unethical to experiment on humans, and the reason they use rats and mice is not because they're similar to humans, so they're not getting information that's related to the human body. They use rats and mice because they're cheap and easy to get hold of and easy to manage. So, that's admitted. And so they're not even testing what they're examining, what they think, is something that is, like you say, something that's supposed to be beneficial, or that they've got their results that say, oh, well, this could be beneficial. Let's try this drug. And it goes into clinical trials. They're not even trying it on anything that's related to humans, and many people say that animals don't even have the same conditions that humans have. And some of the vivisectors some of the people who talk about vivisection have said that they have to induce in these animals the conditions that are similar to this human condition. So they have to induce them. And some of the substances they're using to induce them are some of the substances that we know are toxic. So, it's just they're using toxins to induce conditions that they then find treatments for. And somehow they don't seem to see that surely if you're using some kind of toxin, does that not show you that it's the toxin that is the problem? And maybe using those toxins, things like mercury and formaldehyde and all these kinds of things, that should be a big clue that these chemicals are the problem. And also there's the work of Dr. Harold Hillman, who showed that the actual procedures within a laboratory are quite often the reason for the actual effects that they're seeing. So it's not that there's something wrong in the sample that they're investigating. It's to do with the procedures that they're using that then creates the effects, but they don't take any notice of those procedures or those chemicals that they're using. And then just see these effects, and they're trying to say, oh, that little round shape there in the electron micrograph, oh, that's a virus, because that's what we've been trained to see it as.
Dawn, thank you so much. I guess we're coming up to the end. When someone, as they must often do, emails you and says, well, we've got these, I've got some illness or another, what am I meant to do to reverse the disease process? What are the first things that you advise people? What are the top?
Well, first of all, we don't give anything that can be construed as medical advice. We make suggestions of the kinds of things that they might want to look at within their environment and lifestyle, and say, these factors something that you might want to look at. We try and share information for people to then see what is relevant for them and see if there's something that they can do something about. I mean, most people generally have read the book or some of it, and so they're not coming kind of like cold from the outside to ask for advice. But if people want something to do with medical advice, then I'm afraid that's not what we give. We don't have that. We don't have the ability to do that. It's just it's the whole legal stuff. We can't give advice. We share information. We share information. Oh, and we share information and say, well, you might like to have a look at this. This website might give you some of the information you're looking for, or that kind of thing.
Very good. Okay, the book is called What Really Makes You Ill, and people can get that, I guess, through the normal sources. Do you want to tell us some of your other links where they can find your writings and how they can stay up to date with you?
Well, the main website for the book, or for information about us, the book, and various interviews and things, is whatreallymakesyouill.com. In the last couple of years, I've been writing on Substack. So my Substack is called Dawn's Writings, and I've got a selection of different articles, mainly exposing some of the problems with the fear-mongering stories that are being put out in the mainstream, because that's one of the things for me is to help people not be drawn into all this fear-mongering, because it will affect their ability to think clearly and to be able to read properly, because they see the headlines, and again at the moment it's the disease X thing.
We've got disease X. What is there to say about disease X? I mean, it's almost like they're making fun of us at this point. They've not even taken the time to give it a proper scary name. It's just disease X, just like in algebra when you're at school, when there's an unknown factor, you call it X.
Yes, that's a good one. There has been a mysterious, unknown possible disease, references to that. I remember coming across that in the research. So, I mean, it's not recent. It's been around for a number of years, this whole idea, because they're trying to scare everyone with, there's millions, billions of trillions or whatever of viruses that we don't know. Some of them might be deadly, and some of them might cause this unknown something or other that's around the corner. It is fear-mongering, which is why one of the things that I try and keep in my writings is to dispel the fear, to help people come away from being afraid, and so that they can actually have a look at what is being said about these things and start to see, okay, they're saying it might be, or it's this, or it's possibly. And you have to say, well, how can they know there's another so-called pandemic or something coming? How can they know? Apparently the last one was the 1918 flu, and then we had this COVID stuff. So why is there another one around the corner when it was 100 years between? So, it's to get people to start thinking more clearly, really, and just to highlight the contradictions, and also show them that there's something else that we need to look at, and it's not to be afraid. It's there's an agenda, but to be aware of the agenda and to start taking control of their lives, taking back responsibility.
All right. Thank you for your service. This is Antony Sammeroff here. I'm in Ixtapa, Mexico, where we're trying to set up a place that people can come to experience detoxification of the body and remineralization, especially for people who are faced with the infertility epidemic and would like to conceive. If you know who's someone who could benefit from this sort of thing, or you yourself would like to spend some time in the sun, reaching health levels of health that you've never dreamed of before, I'm sure you can email the show, and I'm sure Renee will put you in touch with me, or you can find me quite readily on the internet. We are posting articles, including Dawn's, at terrainscience.com. You're listening to Vaccine Information Coalition, and our show can be accessed, downloaded, and shared on whatinthecell.podbean.com, or on the front of our vacinfo, vacinfo.org website under the little boy flexing his muscles. We're on every Monday, 2 p.m. EST, and our contact number is 954-347-9671. I'd like to thank Progressive Radio Network for allowing us to give you this uncompromised truth and